This is a training on time and effort. It's record keeping requirements for employees that are paid with federal funds. So this training today is only for OSSI employees. This is not for your grantees. So this is just the record keeping that OGMC does for the agency for anybody who is paid with federal funds, and the record keeping that we have to keep for when we have an audit the agency.
I'm seeing, Carolyn, I think you click on the chat. I'm seeing across the screen, Carolyn. Is everyone seeing that?
That is being recorded?
I mean, I can see Carolyn, there's a drop down screen she has across the PowerPoint.
Is everybody still seeing the PowerPoint okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I think that it's not in presentation mode.
Oh, I got you. Yes.
It's the one all the way at the end that looks, yep, that one right there.
Okay. There you go. Thank you. That's helpful. I'm a little out of practice. Haven't done this in a while, y'all. Okay, so.
And I'm sorry, one more thing. If you can
Yes.
move your mic up a bit on your headphones.
Okay, is that better?
Not much.
See if I can make it a little louder. Okay, is that better? A little louder?
Not much.
Sounds like you went lower, Nancy.
Okay, how's that?
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna get started. The very first thing is documentation for personnel expenses. So this is in 2 CFR 200.430 in our trustee book from the Department of Ed. This is all salaries and wages that are charged to federal awards must be supported by a system that provides reasonable assurance that the personnel costs incurred are accurate, allowable, and allocable. And it must show that the employee worked on that specific program cost objective, which is the grant the employee's salary is being charged to. So this is for the most part, there's 2 different types that we're going to get to, but these records must accurately reflect the work that you perform. So many of our staff are paid with federal funds here, like a lot. So I think most of you on here are familiar to me for being on those federal funds. So we have 2 types of time and effort reporting. We have something called the SAC, which is the Semi-Annual Certification. And that's for people who work on a single cost objective. This certificate needs to be completed every 6 months. So the first certificate covers the first half of the fiscal year. So it ends on March 31st, and I usually get those out to you in April. And the second half one ends in September 30th, and we get those out. We try to get that out in October. There's also called a PAR, which is a personnel activity report. And these are for staff members at OSSI who are paid with 2 or more cost objectives. This report needs to be completed every pay period in PeopleSoft. Carol can go into this a little bit more, but she gets those your cost objectives set up in your PeopleSoft, and you have to put in the number of hours that you spend on each of those different cost objectives, each pay period as you're filling out your times. So the semi-annual certification, if an employee works in a single cost objective, so say you just work on, Nicole, I'll use you as an example, you just work on the McKinney-Vento grant. It's after the fact is when we are giving you this documentation. So we get a report, Carol and I, that is called the position funding report, and it shows how payroll paid your salary. You should be aware of how you're paid, whether you're paid with local funds or federal funds. And if you're paid with federal funds, it should be the grant that you are working on. So it's after the fact. So if you get this documentation and you think, or your manager thinks that you don't actually work on that grant, then we need to go back and fix that, and we have to journal it because it's already how you were paid. So sometimes people will say when they get this, like, oh, I don't work on that, can you just change it? And it's not that simple, because you were being paid for that whole pre-period, that whole first half of the year, or the whole second half of the year. It should account for the total activity. The certificate can be assigned by employee or supervisor who knows that the employee does work on that particular cost objective. And we do it every 6 months. OGMC will prepare the certificate, and then we send them out to the grant leads. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
So are you done with the April round of that, or did that get delayed with the pandemic?
No, they've already all gone out for April, and we've gotten them all back.
Great.
Okay. So this is a sample of a SAC certification. So this one here, you'll see it'll say the cost objective is IDEA Part B, Section 611, State Activities Monitoring Compliance. You can see we have an awful lot of staff here at OSSI that work on this particular cost objective. It doesn't mean they have to work on it 100% necessarily, but when they are being paid with those funds, so some people might be 50% local and 50% of this. That means half of their time they're spent on this. So it says when they are paid with the grant funding listed, 100% of their time and effort was spent on the single cost objective. But we don't have to put in exactly every percentage on a semi-annual certification when you're just working on one particular. So Nikki was signed this for the whole division, since this falls under K-12. And you'll see it was signed on 4/26. So we had them out by the end of April, and we usually ask them to get them back into us, as soon as they're able to verify that. So reconciliations or corrections on SAC would be if employee on the SAC does not work on the cost objective that is listed, the fiscal lead will need to do the following. They have to bring it to the attention of OGMC. We're asking that they do not alter the PDF that was created, because that is like a document that we have created based on how you were paid. So we need to make sure we get everything corrected before we want to alter that PDF. Oops, sorry. So the fiscal person will work with the OCFO budget analyst to journal the charges to the appropriate funding, and then move that staff member to the appropriate funding permanently. In the past, we've had where they get it corrected, where they'll journal those funds off, but they never got the funding change. So then it just continues to happen that person continues to get paid with those federal funds that they no longer or don't work on anymore, or they no longer worked on. And then they have to inform OGMC that the journaling has happened, so a revised SAC certificate can be created. So this does happen here. Sometimes I think what happens is a new person might get hired, and the vacancy, they might just put them in a vacancy, and that vacancy may have been previously paid with federal funds, but then that new person doesn't work on that particular grant. And that's a big no-no. We have to be really, really careful, just like when we are most of you on here are all grant managers, when you're checking the reimbursement requests from your grantees to make sure that those funds that they're spending money on are the activities that they're spending money on fall under the allowability for that particular grant. We have to do the same thing at the state level, where we're making sure that we're not using IDA funds, 21st century funds, any of our federal grant funds on paying personnel that don't work on that particular grant. So it is a very it's a serious activity that when we do these, we have to really attest to the fact that it is true and accurate. And so we always want you to bring it to our attention if your name is on something and you don't work on that cost objective, because we definitely have to get that corrected. Does anybody have any questions about this one? Okay. So Carol's going to take over from this part on. And if you have any questions, she'll stop periodically as well.
Sure.
Okay,
Thanks,
Carol.
Nancy.
Sure.
So as Nancy explained, the personnel activity report, which we generally refer to it as the PAR, either the PAR or the SAC. So the PAR was really designed for those employees that are being paid with more than 2 federal grants, okay? Like Nancy explained, the SAC is if you're being paid with 1 federal grant and local, or maybe 100% federal grants. But when it comes to the PAR, you're being paid with more than 2 federal grants. And therefore, you are required, the activity for this one, which is different than the activity for the SAC, the activity for the PAR must be completed in PeopleSoft. So OGMC would provide those who are paid with multiple federal funds a combination code, as well as would explain to them the percentage of each of those federal funds that they're being paid with, right? So at the end of the day, it would total your number of hours worked for each of those grants, right? Nancy, you could
Yeah,
go to the
Go,
next
there
one.
you go.
So this is just a sample of the PeopleSoft that when you go in to complete your bi-weekly pay sheet, you would, timesheet, sorry, you would have entered where it says the combination code. We would provide you that code and you would enter that. And say, for example, if with Title I, you've been, you're getting 25% of your salary being paid with Title I, then you would put in the first line, you would put 2 hours for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And you enter that code, and the code that we would provide you with would align itself with, say, Title I funds. And in line 2, then you would also, similarly, you're getting paid 75% of your salary with Title II funds. So in that case, in line 2, you would enter 6 hours each day. And again, that would total your total hours, which would be 8 hours per week. The 2 hours and the 6 hours would equal 8 hours for that day. And then you carry that through to your entire pay period reporting, and it would equal your 40 hours. Okay? Nancy, you could go to the next slide. So it's just very important to ensure that you, because the thing is, you can go into PeopleSoft and do your time without entering the combination code, right? And that would definitely make our agency out of compliance. So we must stay in compliance by completing the personnel activity report in PeopleSoft. So Nancy, you can go to the next slide. So the bottom line is that it's important to stay compliant, and it's just, you really don't have much to do when it comes to completing the PAR. It's simply, we provide you with that information and we expect you to complete that information when you're completing your timesheet. So in conclusion, time and effort reporting is a compliance requirement, and it must be reported bi-weekly in PeopleSoft for those people who are paid with 2 or more federal grants. And really, that's in a package all there is to the PAR. Any questions?
Wow, we knew we were going to be fast, but this was really fast. It really isn't that, like there's not a lot of content to it. It's just the 2 different types, the SAC and the PAR, and just like knowing, you know, how you are paid. It really is important. Everybody really should know how you're paid. So, and if, I don't think we had any fiscal leaders on this call for divisions, but it's really important when somebody new starts that their funding is set up properly from the beginning. Because I know with health and wellness, like a lot of times they think they've switched somebody to the right funding, flip-flopping two people from one grant to a different grant, the way they were stated. And it seems like it takes a while for it to catch up with with the budget folks sometimes. So and OCFO. So you have to work closely with them to make sure that your staff on each grant team is listed properly. So as Carol said, we've done great in this agency for many years now of not having any findings. So we want to really keep that going and keep our internal controls tight and make sure that we are following this. It's an important thing to do because we really do want the money spent on each grant towards that particular cost objective. So, anybody have any questions at all?
I have a question.
Great.
How do we know in our division who's supposed to be doing this PAR reporting? I know in the past, personal experience, I was using a combo code for a Title II grant many years ago and continued using that combo code into a new fiscal year when I wasn't supposed to. Like, for our child division, where can I find a list of like who's supposed to be using combo codes? And then like making so I can follow up with them and ensure they're doing it correctly. Or like, would you know on your end if they're not doing it correctly? Like, do you get flags? Or like, where's the accountability for that? Like, how do I know if TAL staff are doing this right or not?
So, and then generally what we do, we pull the funding report. In that report, it would delineate who are being paid with multiple federal grants. And if that's the case, we will pull that person information and we would prepare an Excel spreadsheet and we would give it to that individual and advise them how to report their activity in PeopleSoft. So all of the people or the employees, in fact, that are being paid with multiple federal funds are being advised at the beginning of our fiscal year. And if there's any changes, then they're also during the year, they're being advised if there's any changes, they will be advised. So I'm not sure how that happened.
Well, where could I see a list of all the people in the TAL division that do need to do PAR reporting?
I can provide you that information.
Okay, thank you.
Carol, this is so meta. Just a quick question. I just want to make sure I understood what you just said. So based on Annette's question. So if someone is identified for doing PAR, like they're supposed to do a PAR, but they don't, do you get some sort of notification if they don't complete it?
But no, I don't, because that's a disconnect between, we don't have access to their personnel file to know if they're doing it correctly. So we rely on when the manager is approving that employee's time, that they are doing a verification that employee is completing that portion of the timesheet. But we have no way of knowing if they do or they do not. It's up to that employee. We provide them the information and give them the guidance of how to get it done and accomplished. And it's the manager that needs to be verifying that when they're doing the approving the time. And in the spreadsheet, when we send the spreadsheet out, it also the manager is already also on there and they're notified as well.
So the managers have been given the same instructions as the employees, so they can double check that when they verify time. So that's the gatekeeping way.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What if managers have changed? Like we've had some recent organizational changes within TAL where many people have a different manager than they did a year ago or 6 months ago.
If that's the case, we also notify them, but I don't
Do you guys get notified when those manager roles change for everyone that does PAR reporting, or is that up to the division to like reach out and tell you that that's changed?
At this point, it would be up to the division, and we are really trying to get this centralized, but we're still in the process of trying to work with HR to centralize this process. But as we speak, we depend on the division to give us a notification of what activities in terms of staff being moved around or no longer there and so forth to let us know. Sometimes we find out people are not there after a month. You know, there's no central
Yeah, yeah, because then if,
that the agency says, you
Hmm.
know what, this, you know, this employee is no longer with the agency. I mean, we just by hearsay. So,
right. Yeah, I think that's an issue
Mhm.
for many areas
Yeah.
of OSSI's work to not know when people have departed the agency if you weren't in that division getting the email like so and so's last day, it was Friday.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and those are great questions. And Carol and I have in the past when we did this training, we included OCFO, we included OGC, and we included human resources. And we've had meetings with all of them to try to see how we could tighten this up because, you know, HR doesn't tell OGMC when somebody leaves or even when somebody is hired. We've tried to see if we can get some kind of notification. So if a new hire comes along, how are they being paid? But HR will say, well, we don't determine how they're paid. The divisions do. And then that's with OCFO. So it's kind of like everybody kind of has a little piece in this, like the hiring, the budgeting team with OCFO. We've just asked OGC for just some guidance, but the bottom line is no other teams in the agency have really changed their processes for like hiring and I think there's just too many different steps along the way. And so it's not really sits with one particular team. So unfortunately for OGMC, we just try our best. Like Carol and I are looking at those reports, not just twice a year. Carol does it in the beginning to set up all the PARs and I'm doing the SACs, but we try to look at it periodically to see if people if people have left because at the end, like if I had made the one for the end of March and then I'm going to do the one at the end of September and then people are just missing off of there, I have to determine did they get moved off of federal funding and now they're local? And if that's the case, because that happens a lot, I have to find out what date that happened because they're only should have gotten paid, up until the time they stopped working on that cost objective. Or if they've left the agency, I have to put on that SAC, their last day was on such and such date so that the auditors know that we didn't pay them past that time with federal funds once they obviously no longer worked here, so there's it's not super clean, unfortunately, and we have tried to get buy-in and we do this every year, but I'm not trying to say anything bad about any other division, but we don't really have a good process in this agency for like notifying us. And as Carol mentioned, she can't check on the timesheets because that's confidential information. So we're not privy to that to make sure people are doing that properly. So there definitely are some weaknesses in this, but we try our best to stay on top of it. But the more we can hear from divisions, if that somebody left and a lot of times we don't hear about, oh no, that person doesn't work on this cost objective is when I'm sending it out halfway through the year and they've already been being paid with it all that time. So it's just there is a lot of it is you're right due to sometimes changing in managers like the hiring manager just is filling a vacancy but they're not necessarily paying attention to the funding for that particular position. That's happened a lot. So because I know like there's DAR folks that support different divisions in the agency and some of their salary is paid with those federal funds if they do like some type of data for those particular grants. But like when a DAR person leaves and a new one comes in, they might not necessarily put them on that same thing, but that's what the position was funded with. So we had that a lot and we had to try to really talk to DAR and DAR's fiscal people to make sure that, they try to keep on top of that as well. But a lot of it sometimes and I shouldn't say a lot, sometimes we are fixing things, have to journal things after the fact to like get in compliance to say, okay, they didn't work on that. What is their real cost objective and journal those funds off, whether we have to journal them from federal to local. But we really do want to try to use the federal funds that we do get that we are allowed to use on staff because, I think you all know like local funds are limited. So everybody in the agency couldn't be paid with local funds. That would be great. We wouldn't have to worry about time and effort, but there's not enough local funds to pay all the positions, and we are allowed to use our federal funds to pay for staff. So we do try to take advantage of that, but we do want to make sure that we're doing it, with keeping in mind what's allowable and real, that people really are working on those particular grants. So I know
So-
that's not a really good answer to your question.
That's
we
okay.
haven't been successful is the bottom line in getting others in the agency to provide us information, like at either the HR level or OCFO. OCFO isn't really a part of OSCE, so they're not really obligated to say every time somebody's position changes and they see it come across their desk to notify us. Like people don't want to put those extra responsibilities on their teams. So we just try the best we can to make sure we're keeping it
Got it.
accurate as possible. And we definitely do need the help of our grant managers to say they do work on that or point out when they don't, and then their managers as well to try to be on top of it too.
So if someone is partially funded by local funds and partially funded by a federal grant, they would do PAR reporting. And then separately, if somebody's funded no local funds, but 2 different federal grants, then they would do PAR reporting in both cases?
No, the first case would be a SAC. If you're only paid with one federal fund, whether it's 100% of your salary or only 25% of your salary, then it's a SAC. So if it's just a single federal fund you're being paid with, whether it's all that and some local or some of that and some local, you have to do a SAC. You only do a PAR when you're getting paid with 2 or more federal funds.
Got it.
So I don't know how privy to, and you guys are out there when somebody new gets hired on your team to be able to check the funding, but you should be able, especially if you're a manager, to ask for that funding report from OCFO to see how your staff are paid, because it will say on there how they're paid, 25% of, and they'll list the name of the grant, and then maybe 75% local, be example. So that person's name would be listed twice on a position funding report, showing the 2 different percentages of their pay. But we can, if you have any questions, you can always ask Carol and myself, and we can we can check for you if you have any questions about a particular staff and let you know how they're being paid if you're not able to get the if OCFO isn't willing to give that report out to too many different folks in the agency.
Yeah, I'll be sending a follow-up email because we have a staff that I think switched from someone on our team got a promotion or a new position that I believe now is jumping from one federal grant to another, and we got a new grant manager hire and somebody left, and there's been a lot of moving parts in the last 6 months. I'll send you a follow-up email then.
Okay, sounds great. Anybody else have any questions?
Nancy's Patrice, I wonder if our new manager has received any of this.
Alexis?
Yes. Is she here?
Or...
I wonder if she's in here. I can't really see the group. If she hasn't, I'll definitely give her a heads up about all of this as well.
Yeah, I don't see this. I don't see Alexis on here, but yes, since she is a new manager, it would be good for her to have this information. We're happy to send this PowerPoint out, and then if she has any questions or she can listen to the recording.
Yes, if you could send this out, that would be great.
Lauren, do you typically send the recording out afterwards to everyone on the list?
Sorry, what is the recording?
Did you usually send out the PowerPoints and the recording afterwards, or
Yeah,
we just post them somewhere?
I can.
Either way, we'll let you know, Patrice, whether it's posted somewhere for you all to access or whether we'll be able to just send it directly.
Yeah, and because you recorded it, you can, everyone will have access that was on the call, but I believe we can post it somewhere general. I think we did.
Okay.
You should be able to post the recording will be posted right in Teams, and you can also add the PowerPoint to Teams.
Yeah, it's in the chat box. That's where it is.
Okay.
Right.
And I'll add the PowerPoint. Thanks, Samantha.
Thank you.
Any other questions? participating. Please share with any of your colleagues that maybe weren't able to attend, and we'll get this all posted in the chat. And then if you know of anybody, like Patrice mentioned, Alexis, I can send that to her. But we are happy that you all were participating and had some great questions today. So let us know if you need anything, and if you have any questions come up later on that you think about, or you have new staff starting and you want to know how they're paid, or if they're going to be a par or any of that, and you're a manager, then please let us know and we'll help with that. Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thanks. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
You also, thank you.